to another lightning talk here on YouTube Live. My name is Daniel Urrela. I'm a product designer here at Nolte, and today I'll be talking about how to design better user interfaces applying the laws of UX. So if you have any questions during this presentation, please leave your questions in the YouTube chat, and I'll try to answer them after the talk. So maybe right now you're thinking laws of UX. What is that? So let me give a little introduction about that. So the laws of UX are design principles that come from the results of studies and psychology that you can take into account when designing and thinking about the interface and the user experience of a digital product. So I will jump right into this law. I will talk about just like 10 or 13 of these laws. There are a lot more of laws or any other principles to take into consideration when you are designing user interfaces, but I will try to keep it this presentation a little short and just to be efficient with time. So I think these are the most important design principles when that you have to take in consideration when designing a user interface. So the first law it's aesthetic usability effect, and this law is about what it refers to is that users mm, have a tendency to perceive attractive products as more usable. People tend to believe that things that look better will work better. So, as an example, uh, we can see this in maybe in a login screen when you have, for in this example, two different login UIs, and if you take a look, one looks like it's going to be harder to fill the form against the other one. So also the user will perceive that uh, one application is going to be more friendly than the other, and or it's going to be easier to use. So on one hand, on the left side, we have a login application that it lacks uh, some some of the design principles, and on the other side, we have the Envision login. Uh, so you clearly see that one, it's like seems easier to use, even if you have the same fields. Uh, seems one seems easier to use than the other. So that's the what the aesthetic usability effect law means. The other law, the second law that I want to talk about is the Fitts law, that says that the time required to rapidly move to a target area is a function of the ratio between the distance to the target and the width of the target. So maybe some of these concepts are a little complex to understand, but that's why I want to show some practical examples of all these laws applied on the UI. So this law, it's uh, most of this law is used on designing when you design buttons. So basically, what it means is that if the target, then in this case a button is larger, it's going to be easier for the user to click on that button. So that's why you probably see on some UI designs like this example that the button extends to the full width of the design. And this is also a common use when you design mobile applications. You try to extend the button to the whole screen just to try to make it easier to the user to reach that target. Um, Other law is the Hicks Law that says that the time it takes to make a decision increases with the number and complexity of choices. So what this law means is that we sometimes have maybe a form that is too big. It has several fields, and a good practice will be to separate this form into different steps. So in this example, Airbnb uses this law by only asking you where you want to go at the beginning, and then asking you the dates and all the rest of the details that they need to suggest you a location. So this is a practical use of Hicks law, and it's a practical use that in when designing forms that have different too many fields. So the other law is Jacob's law that says that users spend most of their time on other sites. This means that users prefer your site to work the same way as all of the other sites that they already know. So a common example of this is e-commerce. Uh, you probably have seen that most e-commerce have when you go to the detail page of a product, you see the image on the left side and the product details on the right side. So this is a common example of the Jacob's law applied on a website, when basically what it says is that you should consider and take patterns from other websites and apply it on your own website, so that users will use your website easily. So the basic idea uh, around it is that try to not make the user think too much about where to find the information that they need. That's why Jacob's law, what it says is that you need to follow some patterns that are already used on other websites. Another law is the law of common region that says that elements tend to be perceived into groups if they are sharing an area with clearly defined boundaries. So a common example would be that sometimes we see these designs that when you split the screen into, and that way what you're doing is that by separating this design into, but with color or maybe a line or some other visual elements, you are improving hierarchy and help to highlight certain information. So another similar law of the previous law is the law of proximity, that say that objects that are near or proximate to each other tend to be grouped together. So basically what it says is that for example, in e-commerce again, when you enter to the products page or to the store page, you see that always there is a sidebar on the left side and then the products on the right side. So this is close, or is really related to the previous law, because the difference is that in this law you are grouping things by putting it together closer to each other, instead of using visual elements like lines or background colors or stuff like that. So this is a common example of the law of proximity. And the other law is the Miller's law, that says that the average person can only keep 7 plus or minus 2 items in the working memory. And one of the uh, very common examples of this law is when you use it on the menus of every site, that the a good practice is to not have more than 7 items on the website. This is basically because most of users are not going to memorize or not paying attention on more than 7 items at a time. Another law is the serial position effect, that says that users have a propensity to best remember the first and the last items in a series. And we can find this on the navigation bar at the bottom of almost every application right now. And to apply this law to an app, basically designers put the at the left or at the right of the navigation bar the most important sections of the app. Another law is the Tesler's law, that is also known as the law of conservation of complexity. And this states that for any system, there is a certain amount of complexity which cannot be reduced. So a practical example of this will be well, first of all, sometimes we, as designers, tend to reduce and simplify all the UI, basically to make it look simpler to use. But sometimes when we apply the Tesler's law, we need to think about that some of these fields in the form, for example, we can remove those because the application needs those fields to work. So sometimes we need to apply the Tesler's law to identify what are the fields that we need, and be careful and not to simplify it too much, the UI, because it can cause some troubles when the user starts using the application. So another example or another law will be the bond resort effect, also known as the isolation effect, that predicts that when multiple similar objects are present, the one that differs from the rest is most likely to be remembered. So a common example of this will be chats, online chats that on different websites that we can see right now. If you enter a website, you can see a circle floating at the bottom right corner of website, and it is different. Sometimes it is different in color and in shape of the rest of the website, and by doing that, we highlight that part of the UI, and we make it stand out and draw attention to that element. So we can use this in different examples, not just in websites. We can use it in other designs like print design, posters, flyers. When we try to stand out something from the rest, we try to make it different, align it different, or use a different contrast color, or something like that can help to highlight the element that we want. And finally, I think this is the final law, the Zeigarnik effect. People remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than the completed task. So example of this is when you see on a website that to fill a profile, you need to do several tasks, and if you don't do it, the UI it will constantly remember you that you need to you have like 10% left that you need to fill. So by doing this, that the application try to let you know that you need to fill this, and sometimes you feel like in an internal process you want to complete them. So this is good when you try to make the user feel like the profile or maybe another task in order to the application works at its best, right? So you use this effect to trying to to make him complete all the process that it needs to be done. So in summary, we must take into account each of these norms to contemplate all the options that a user is going to find and help them achieve their objectives when using a digital product. And that's all. That are the most important laws of UX. And I hope you find it useful when designing your next user interface. And even if you are not a designer, you can use these UX laws just to have a basic knowledge of what you can do or what you can suggest when building digital products. Thank you. If you have any questions, leave it in the YouTube channel. So Jeff says, how do you keep track of all of these principles when designing? Well, at the beginning, I think you probably, I recommend to do like a checklist, and once you finish the design, try to uh, go over that list and see if you missed some of these laws, uh, or maybe you are approaching the design in a different way that maybe being it's going against one of these laws. So a checklist it's useful, and once you have a lot of practice doing that, you're going to have it on your mind already, and you're going to start to design based on these laws without even thinking. But it takes practice, and but a good starting point would be to do a checklist and try to apply as much as you can to the design. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Mauricio asked, on all devices, mobile, tablets, desktop. Uh, yeah, this laws applies on uh, every device, maybe in uh, slightly different ways, but overall these laws uh, are usability kind of laws. So yeah, it applies most in most of the devices. Oscar says, this is pretty amazing. Do you have any advice for a non-designer to apply and follow these rules, like how to start? Yeah, like I said, I think that for developers, it is good to have like a checklist. I mean, in internet, if you search for laws of UX, there's going to be a lot of lists of these laws, and you can just do a checklist, and maybe when you start building a product, you can see that, mm, uh, or maybe you can see as a developer the reasons behind the why the design is was done that way, or maybe you can suggest a change in the design by taking in consideration this UX law. So yeah, a starting point will be to make a list and just trying to evaluate the design based on that list. Mm. Herman says, while designing, have you faced a point when the different laws may take you to two different paths, and how do you decide which one to follow? Yeah, that's one thing that it can happen. For example, one of the laws said that you probably need to separate a form into different steps, and I don't remember which one of the other law. For example, the Airbnb example says that the Hicks Law says that uh, it's a good practice to separate a form with into different steps, and the other law that it's the Tesla's law says that try to not remove uh, too much fields uh, on a form, for example, to because that causes some troubles. So basically, the what you need to think about is what the user, whether the user needs to feel. So just by putting an example of in a form. Uh, so what you need to think is that if if the user needs to fill this information now, or maybe they can fill it later. And also, all these laws are, you need to take in consideration the user personas. So maybe for a user persona, uh, split the form into different uh, steps will be the best approach. But maybe if we are talking about a user persona that is used to, it's familiar with technology, maybe you can, you know, use all the fields at the same time and it won't be a problem. So basically, you need to think about who is going to use the the app or the website, and based on that, decide which law applies better for each user. That will be my approach to that. Mm, Mauricio also says that if there are any other specific laws for each device, um, overall, I think these laws cover uh, a lot of the usability issues in general, but there are also another like design principles for mobile specifically. So yeah, that I mean these are laws for UX in general, but there are also laws for mobile specific UI. But yeah, this laws applies to every device. But if you want design principles that are specific for desktop or for mobile, there are another more that goes more in detail into what to do on how to design UI for mobile, for example. Gerardo says, more than a question, I want to know your comments on how big apps, thousand users, uh, decide on how to use design rules. In my opinion, not all of these rules are applied. Yeah, well, these are laws that are taken as a starting point, but but yeah, once you apply these laws, you need to test your assumptions that this law is it's the best way to approach the design. So yeah, these laws are like a starting point to design the UI, but then you need to test your UI. And if your users are not using if you see usability issues, you need to change the design, even if it it's not aligned with these laws. But I would suggest to use this as a starting point and then test by doing user testing or maybe A/B testing, and then you start to improve the design based on the user's feedback. So yeah, that's what I think that big apps does. They start by following certain design principles, then test what is working, what is not, and based on that, change the UI based on the design feedback. So Oscar says, do you think the Jakob Nielsen advices are still useful these days? Do you have some books recommendations to get deep into this? And yeah, Jakob Nielsen advices are still useful these days. The some of these, I don't know if I mentioned that the Jakob Law is based on Jakob Nielsen, and the aesthetic usability effect it's it's aboard on the Jakob Nielsen Group website. So yeah, some of these laws are taken from there, and but yeah, overall the Jakob Nielsen Group is still the the most important source of usability uh, principles. And overall recommendations of book, I think that there are a lot of books that talk uh, about mobility, mobile best practices, and also a good book would be the Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. That's Don't Make Me Think is also a good book. Thank you, Jeff, for that. And yeah, but the Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, it's a good book to read about how different products, not only digital products, are designed, and most of the usability issues that they find, and how they solve different products, not only uh, digital products. Jeff says, are these principles applied to physical products? I honestly don't exactly don't know, but I think it can apply. Uh, some of these laws are not just for well, talking about design. Some of these laws are not uh, just for digital products. You can see some of these laws when designing posters or designing flyers or well, some other print design stuff. So I think this some of these might apply to product design, like physical products like shoes or cars or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. Moises says, is there room for innovation? Are there laws you can break and still make great UX? Yes, I think these, as I say, these are just the starting point. And once you master these laws, you can tweak them a little and try to find something new. But yeah, the a good suggestion would be to not uh, not try to not to do something really new or really innovative, because sometimes that can go wrong, and you can, by trying to innovate, to build a website or an app that is not uh, useful. But I think you can you can still have a room for innovation once you master these laws, and maybe you can start mixing these two or three laws together and trying to come up with something different. But at the end, you need to test all these ideas, and the user will tell you if this new idea of showing some information in a new way, it has a good result or not. But yeah, I think there is still room for innovation. I think um, these are the laws that exist right now, but these laws are based on studies, psychological studies. So I think that technology is evolving really quickly, and in the future we might have like 5 or 10 new laws. But yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Mo. Jeff says, have these laws changed? Um, I think some of these laws are new than others. That's why I say that probably in 5 or more years we're gonna have a new one. But these laws, I don't think they have changed since the the results of the study uh, came up. But some of these laws are from the 40s, and some of these laws are from the 90s. So, yeah, some these laws are basically there because mm, it has they have been proved to have a good impact in the UX. So I don't think they have changed since they came out, but I think new laws are coming out. Maybe not in the form of laws of UX, but yeah, good practices are always uh, changing and always evolving. I mean, as when you can see it uh, when a new iOS version came, and it adds new functionality, then maybe that some uh, good practices or some new good practices can arrive. But yeah, good question, Jeff. Yeah, since inception, I don't think they have changed. Thank you, Beth. Um, I don't know if you have any other question, but if not, then I think that's it. I think that we'll see you on the next lightning talk. And thank you everybody for your attention.